Western philosophy begins with a striking figure, Socrates, a stonemason philosopher of 5th century BCE Athens, who shifted the philosophical gaze from cosmology to ethics and human conduct. He is remembered less for specific doctrines and more for his method, a persistent questioning technique now known as the Socratic method, where truth is pursued through dialogue, exposing contradictions in one's beliefs. Socrates believed that knowledge is virtue, and ignorance is the root of all moral failing. His focus on inner moral clarity, rather than obedience to societal norms, forms the philosophical basis of conscience, a critical theme in UPSC ethics. Refusing to escape prison after being sentenced to death, Socrates embodied civil disobedience in favor of a higher moral law, a profound case of ethical integrity over legal conformity. His student, Plato, preserved and expanded his thought, particularly in The Republic, where he envisioned a just society governed by philosopher kings, those guided not by desire or power, but by rational understanding of the eternal and unchanging forms, especially the form of the good. Plato's tripartite theory of the soul, reason, spirit, and appetite, mirrored his view of the ideal state, arguing that justice arises when each part of the soul or class in society performs its natural role. His thought introduces idealism into Western political theory, where reality is seen as a shadow of higher truths, relevant when we consider ethical ideals in public administration. Yet Plato's abstract idealism was challenged by his student Aristotle, who preferred concrete realities and practical reasoning. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics laid the foundation for virtue ethics, where moral character and habits are central. Unlike Plato, who sought eternal truths, Aristotle emphasized eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or the good life, achievable through moderation and the golden mean. His insights into justice, friendship, and political community, especially the idea that man is a political animal, offer enduring lessons for civil services, where the balance between personal virtue and civic responsibility is crucial. For Aristotle, ethics and politics were two sides of the same coin. A state exists not just for life, but for the good life, an idea echoed in modern debates about governance and welfare. After the classical era, as the Roman Empire declined, Western thought became entwined with Christian theology, notably in the work of St. Augustine and later St. Thomas Aquinas, who attempted to reconcile faith with reason. Augustine emphasized the city of God versus city of man, suggesting that temporal institutions are flawed reflections of divine order, an early engagement with the idea that ethical governance must acknowledge human fallibility. Aquinas, drawing from Aristotle, argued for natural law, the idea that moral order is embedded in human nature and accessible to reason. This concept later influenced constitutional thought and modern legal ethics, asserting that unjust laws are not truly laws, a principle that underpins the moral legitimacy of governance, especially when dealing with issues like corruption or unjust policy. As Europe moved into the modern age, René Descartes marked the beginning of modern philosophy with his famous declaration, cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. With Descartes, the focus shifted to rationalism, where reason was the foundation of knowledge, echoing the bureaucratic ideal of clear thinking and objectivity. Descartes' methodological doubt, where everything is questioned to reach certainty, parallels the rational scrutiny expected in civil service decision-making. On the other hand, John Locke, a contemporary of Descartes, emphasized empiricism, knowledge through experience, and is credited with the foundations of liberal political thought. Locke argued for natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and proposed the social contract, where governments derive legitimacy from the consent of the governed. These ideas profoundly shaped modern democracy and the Indian Constitution, especially Article 21, which guarantees the right to life and personal liberty. Locke's emphasis on toleration and limited government also ties into UPSC themes like ethical governance and individual rights. David Hume, further developing empiricism, introduced a skeptical view of reason, suggesting that emotions, or sentiments, are at the root of moral decisions. His insight prefigures modern behavioral ethics, where decisions are influenced more by psychological impulses than cold logic, a reminder that policy must consider human psychology, not just abstract rationality. In contrast, Immanuel Kant, reacting against Hume, reasserted reason's primacy but in a unique way. Kant's deontological ethics emphasized duty, moral law, and autonomy. His famous categorical imperative, "Act only on that maxim which you can will to become a universal law," offers a powerful tool for ethical reasoning in public life. Kant believed in treating people as ends in themselves, not merely as means, a direct application to public administration, where citizens are not clients to be manipulated, but dignified beings whose rights must be upheld. His thought underpins modern ethical frameworks and has strong overlaps with constitutional morality. Moving forward, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel introduced the idea of dialectical progression, where history unfolds through contradictions and their resolution, and viewed the state as the embodiment of ethical life. Though critiqued for justifying authority, Hegel's view encourages us to see governance as a rational unfolding of freedom and rights. His ideas indirectly influenced Karl Marx, who turned Hegel's idealism on its head. For Marx, it is material conditions, not abstract ideas, that shape human consciousness. His theory of historical materialism and critique of class exploitation led to the idea that the state serves dominant economic interests. While India is not a Marxist state, Marx's insights remain crucial when analyzing inequality, exclusion, and policy for the marginalized. In contrast, John Stuart Mill, a liberal utilitarian, emphasized individual liberty, freedom of expression, and the greatest happiness principle. Policies must aim at the maximum well-being of the maximum number. Mill also advocated for women's rights and minority protections, concepts central to modern pluralistic societies like India. His balance between freedom and utility is especially relevant in today's debates on surveillance, censorship, and affirmative action. Later, Friedrich Nietzsche challenged traditional morality, arguing that values like humility and compassion were slave moralities born from weakness. While controversial, Nietzsche's call for individual self-overcoming and critical thinking challenges bureaucrats to not fall into mediocrity or blind conformity, a caution against moral complacency. In the 20th century, thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, rooted in existentialism, stressed human freedom and responsibility in a meaningless universe. For Sartre, existence precedes essence, meaning we are not born with a fixed nature, but must create ourselves through choices. His concept of bad faith lying to oneself to avoid freedom is directly relevant to administrative ethics, where rationalizations often hide moral failure. Camus' idea of the absurd hero, someone who acts meaningfully in an indifferent world, offers a framework for ethical commitment without illusions. Finally, John Rawls, in the late 20th century, reframed political philosophy through the lens of justice as fairness. Using the thought experiment of the original position behind a veil of ignorance, Rawls argued that principles of justice must be designed without knowing one's position in society, a profound metaphor for policy neutrality, social equity, and affirmative action in democratic governance. His difference principle that inequality is acceptable only if it benefits the least advantaged echoes the spirit of inclusive development. On the other hand, Robert Nozick, his libertarian counterpart, defended individual rights and minimal state intervention, stressing self-ownership and voluntary exchange. This contrast between Rawls and Nozick mirrors the ongoing debate between welfare policies and market efficiency, which administrators must balance in public policy. In conclusion, the journey of Western philosophy from Socratic inquiry to Kantian duty, from Marxist critique to Rawlsian justice, provides not only abstract ideas but practical ethical frameworks for governance, public reasoning, and individual integrity. Serve meaningfully. Provides not only abstract ideas but practical ethical frameworks for governance, public reasoning, and individual integrity. In the context of public service, individual integrity is not merely personal honesty but a philosophical commitment to justice, fairness, and the rational pursuit of the public good. From Socrates' insistence on moral self-examination to Kant's deontological emphasis on duty, and Rawls' impartiality in policy-making, we see that integrity is not accidental. It is cultivated through deliberate reflection, ethical clarity, and courage to act rightly even under pressure. For a civil servant, this means resisting expedient compromises, embracing accountability, and viewing one's role not just as a job but as a moral vocation. Western philosophy also teaches us that ethical dilemmas are not always solved through rules, but through discernment, a synthesis of reason, empathy, and moral imagination. Whether it is Aristotle's idea of virtue as a habit, Mill's weighing of consequences, or Camus' rebellion against absurdity, all converge on one truth: that the ethical life is an active, engaged life, requiring constant balance between ideals and realities. Furthermore, the civil services demand not just technical proficiency, but philosophical depth, the ability to question assumptions, to envision justice beyond statistics, and to ensure that power is always tethered to responsibility. These thinkers equip us with the mental models to navigate uncertainty with wisdom and humility. In a time where public trust in institutions can be fragile, the philosophical grounding of a civil servant becomes not just a personal asset, but a public necessity. Thus, engaging with Western philosophy is not an academic exercise, but a vital preparation for ethical leadership. In the end, the goal is not to memorize thinkers or theories, but to become what Socrates called an examined person, someone who governs not merely by rules, but by conscience, not by authority alone, but by reason, and who strives, in all duties, to serve truth, justice, and the larger human good.